What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Today is Best Served Podcast 332. We're talking Beyond the Boys Club Kitchen with Jessica Biederman of EDGE in Denver, Colorado. Workplaces Worth Working, episode number 15. This is a subject that needs more and more attention. We've definitely hovered over it a little bit and want to continue to unpack just the culture, often toxic culture across restaurants. We talk about that all the time, especially in Workplaces Worth Working, and especially that boys club in the kitchen, and it's something that, as we were getting ready for this episode and thinking about the title of this episode, I was reflecting on, because I've been in those kitchens where it's all hazing all the time. There's so much misogyny. There's so much intense testosterone in those kitchens, and we need to shift that. We need to create workplaces worth working. We need to create inclusive spaces. We need to understand that the diversity of the kitchens, the different styles and backgrounds and experiences and use of language and languages are so fundamental to the strength of this industry that anytime we layer on this bullshit, hazing, toxic culture, we diminish the potential of the individuals, the team, the restaurant, and our community as a whole. So I was excited to be able to have this conversation with Jessica, somebody who, EDGE restaurant, very steakhouse focused, Four Seasons, right? Predominantly has been the old white guys club. And we want to break through that a little bit. And Jessica's doing that within the kitchen, also within the menu, and just how they're navigating the way that they communicate as culinary professionals. So no further ado, I want to bring Jessica in here to break it down for us a little bit. Jessica, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
I am excited to talk to you about this. Before we get into kind of the meat of this conversation, pun intended, a little bit of background on you. Kind of give us a little bit of your trajectory, and then maybe touch on EDGE, kind of how you became the executive chef there at EDGE Restaurants.
Sure. So I was working in Boston for quite some time. I'm originally from Charleston, South Carolina. Kind of grew up in the southern realm of cooking. And about, 12 years ago, decided I kind of wanted to experience something new. So I started to check out some of these larger cities. I worked a stint in DC for about 5 or 6 years. And there was introduced to bourbon steak, which is inside the Four Seasons.
Right.
And just kind of fell in love with both steakhouses and, the Four Seasons brand. There's a shift, as you were saying, in culture, I think, when you go into a corporate setting like Four Seasons that just, holds accountability to everything. So I really quickly kind of fell in love with that and realized I had, a really bright future in that kind of culture. And so then I was transferred from the DC bourbon steak property to Boston, where I spent about 5 years as the executive chef of the restaurant there. And then I was affected by COVID, as many, many, many have been in this industry. So kind of just took a bit of a road trip after that. I wrote on a list kind of everything that I had wanted to do, but never had time.
Right.
Being an executive, there's a lot of work week, but there's not a lot of time for you. So I kind of just started to chip away at those. I went and did a wine harvest in Oregon for about 6 or 7 weeks. That was really fulfilling. And I drove all the way there. So it was interesting to drive across the country. And then kind of landed where is, going to be my home for the next few years in Denver. I taught some culinary school at the Boulder Culinary Institute for a little while, just to kind of get to know the incoming workforce, and to find kind of an understanding behind the curtain from what they're learning and what they're seeing behind the graduation scene as they step foot into, our environments, kind of see what they expect on their side. And then after that, I was able to rejoin Four Seasons. I found out that they had renovated the restaurant, that they were looking for, kind of a different kind of cuisine, and applied there. And it's been history ever since.
Okay, a couple of things I want to unpack from what you said that really got me going a little bit. First, you talked about the kind of the difference in culture with accountability, a word that I appreciate greatly. Talk about that a little bit. How does the culture at corporate run entity, potentially at large, or specifically Four Seasons, how do you see that creating a different level of accountability?
I think it's multi-level, right? Like first of all, you're given the tools to know how to manage correctly. I think when you come up through the independent restaurant chain, you're screamed at and you're belittled and you're berated. And so we all just kind of understand that that's the training, right, of restaurants. And the first thing that
complete lack thereof of training,
yeah,
just thrown in the fire and sink or swim. Yeah,
it really is. I remember one of the things that it has stuck with me for years. One of my line cooks looked at me one time and said, "That's great, chef, but sarcasm isn't really a training tool." And that has stuck with me for forever because, you know, some independent cultures, it's not about training the individual. It's about making me pumped up and making me feel better. And we do that by berating, right? And like public ridicule. And so the first thing that Four Seasons kind of gives you is an understanding that that's not the only management style, and that's also not correct. And so they really gave me the tools to begin to find my own voice as a manager and not just repeat the wrongs of the chefs, right? Because that's what happens. It's a lineage. We take our aggressions of all of our anger for years and years at our chefs,
yes,
and then we filter those through our cooks. So
Four Seasons about that being almost like Stockholm Syndrome, where like,
oh, yeah, for sure,
you go from being the oppressed to the oppressor because you're like, I survived this and now I'm better. And then we conflate the idea of being better from the oppression, not because we somehow rose above it, and we get stuck in that loop. So I appreciate you pointing that out. That absolutely plays out again and again. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And we do that like better than any industry for some reason. So we got to break that. So I appreciate you.
And it's like, I'm going to take all of my aggression out on this poor 21-year-old individual that has no idea what I've been through, and I'm going to make sure they feel all my pain, right? So that's not right.
Yeah.
So Four Seasons not only gives you the foundation of tools that you need to manage correctly, but then there's that accountability layer where if you don't, you're held accountable for that. You know, it's if on your own volition you can't do and say the right things, you have somebody above you that's tapping you on the shoulder and saying, you know, we ought not speak to each other like that. So I think there's that, you know, constant personal drive to want to treat people better, because I also believe that people function better when they're not afraid. And I remember how scared I was as a line cook to ever make any mistakes. And it really hindered creativity. It hindered my ability to be open and even share my culinary story with anyone because you're just afraid. And I believe that when you don't treat people like that, when you don't put them in a bubble of fear, they just are such better workers and more open and have fun while they're there, and they're much more loyal to you as well.
Yeah, so, breaking through that tough guy, tough gal mentality. Yeah, I mean that's huge. Creating that space of openness and creativity, because it can't just be about bodies and hands. It has to be about something more, and driving that creativity when they're not in absolute fear, which is a great segue into kids these days. I can't stand that shit. Kids these days as a way to subjugate those who come after us and put ourselves in a position of superiority because we did X, Y, and Z. Like, look, here's the reality. They're smarter than we are, and we don't like it because they recognize that getting a plate thrown at your head is not a badge of honor. It's stupid and toxic.
Yeah.
And they're calling restaurants are not a great place to work if that's the status quo of the environment we're creating. And we don't like that because that's how we came up. And now they're saying, no, that's not okay. And the gatekeepers, have changed. It is not the gatekeeper of the old white man holding your resume hostage so that you can get the next upward mobility position because you worked under X, Y, and Z. They don't need you anymore. They can go and sell their family's pastry recipe direct to consumers on Instagram. Like, they don't need you anymore. Yet they maybe need that sense of community, that sense of belonging that a kitchen can create if it's created not in this boys club way that we have so often. So you going and seeing and really interacting with the kids, not putting your own philosophical stamp on them, but really communicating with them directly. I'm fascinated in that. I think what a great way for somebody who's already kind of been a prolific chef in known restaurants to say, I'm going to go and work with the people, with the kids, and try and see how I can usher them into this industry. I want to know more about that because we need to get in that mindset. How do we get there, Jessica?
It's really interesting because when I'm jaded at this point. Like, I'm in my 30s. I'm old. I'm not as fast as I used to be. I'm not as spry. You know what I mean? You watch some of these younger generation get in a kitchen and they're savages.
They're running
Like,
circles.
I can't bend like that. I can't kneel anymore. But I think something that we need to realize is that when they're in school and they're about to graduate, they have such an excitement and such a passion and such a, whether they're good or not, right? Just such a hunger to be a chef. It's like this regarded, like hallowed halls that they walk on. And it took me a minute. And then I realized, what we do by bringing them in and being like, you're just a kid, let me show you. We suck that all out of them in like the first 2 weeks that they're working for us. Right. And like, I think it's my responsibility to harness that energy and to help focus it into training to make people successful. But what we want to do right away is beat them down. Right. Yeah. You're nothing, all these quips that chefs have, right? Like we know them all, but we immediately take that excitement and then tell them that they can't do anything. And you can visually see the excitement drain from their eyes. And then to be the teacher too in a classroom where people are, because they all work part-time jobs, most of them, just to help with funding, to hear them talk about their chefs kind of gave me such a behind the curtain kind of thing to hear just kind of the complaining and the communal agreement that they're just not going to be talked to like that. And I think I respect that. For years we thought it was like badass, right? To like never complain when you're sick and work with broken ankles and work injured and, be talked to however you want to be talked to. And I just don't say anything. I just take it. And honestly, I have more respect for this new workforce than I do for myself because they have found that voice to say, absolutely not. You're not going to speak to me like that. I'm not going to work with 110 fever. I'm just not going to do these things. And if that's what you're going to require, then you can find somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think I have a whole lot of respect for that.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's that badge of honor thing where it's like, and I've talked about this a lot, and I know you've experienced it where, working 15 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, 70 hours a week, 30 straight days, right? I now make fun of myself about, there was almost a 7-year span where I didn't take a single sick day, and I was sick as hell so many times that I brought down everybody. Like there was no way that I thought I was being the most productive because I was putting in the most input, but the output on the other side, I was never as good. And then I brought other people down around me for sure. Even by trying to be the one who made sure that I would cover shifts, what I was doing is saying, this is the only way you can succeed is by killing yourself. And it sets an unrealistic expectation for yourself and for others. And we keep making that a badge of honor. So I appreciate you pointing out the fact that it's not a badge of honor. That's just, they're smarter and tougher than we are. I didn't even add the tougher part. You did. Yeah. They're tougher.
I think of it kind of as a badge of naivety too. Like we never really knew what could be or what should be out there. We only know what we came from.
Right.
So you're just naive and you're absolutely right. You think I have to do this or I'll never move up. This is what I have to do. This is what I have to do. And it's just not, Yeah. I've progressed farther in my career underneath the blanket of correct leadership and correct culture than I did, working 2 full-time jobs with pneumonia. So I think, you just, it is what it is now. And I think any chef that wants to reject that and stay in the old way is just going to find themselves, diminished, not because of food, right? Because food quality is only a third of the battle. Honestly, if you don't have any staff to cook the food, you're done.
Yeah. We see the big air quotes, a labor shortage, exposing that right now.
We have to create an environment where people are comfortable and want to come to work. And what I'm finding too, is we've just come through a complete restaurant open. There were 6 days, there were 15 hours, but people are happy to work them because they know it's not forever. Because you have those conversations and you say, I need this grit from you for 2 weeks, and then I will give you 4 days off in a row or whatever, however you do it,
Communication. It's like we forget about that sometimes. We are pure communicators. We just happen to use food, beverage, hospitality as the vehicle for it. So continue to communicate is always key. We talk about with line cooks, communicate, keep talking, chatter, all these different things, and then we stop doing it. Then we don't perpetuate that same good practice of always communicating and make sure that there's the clarity and understanding. And if it means that you do got to put your nose to the grindstone for a couple of weeks, that's different than putting your nose to the grindstone until there's nothing left of you. And that's what we, continued to do. And so I'm interested now too, because there's also a polarization that's happening right now with the reality we're talking about of kids these days actually being the best chance we have to redefine this industry and create a new model for success. Absolutely. It's not going to be us. It's going to be kids these days, and it's our turn to follow them, right? There's also an interesting thing where we went from being the outcasts or Bourdain's Pirates on the Pirate Ship, Band of Rebels, Island of Misfit Toys, all of that. Then all of a sudden we became the cool kids. We were never the cool kids. Like we didn't quite fit in.
Sure.
Yeah, we never quite fit in. We had some swagger to us, no doubt, but we weren't the cool kids. And then we became the cool kids. All of a sudden we're like, rubbing elbows with like athletes and celebrities because you're a chef, and then chefs are on TV and all this is happening. And I didn't know how to handle it. Very much like spun off our axis quite a bit. And then all of a sudden now we're the establishment. And so when you say kids these days, I'm like, these kids are more like us because they're calling BS on the establishment. We just happen to be the establishment now. It also has set an unrealistic expectation of what it means to be a chef, right? You see chefs on TV and culinary shows and all this. That isn't the actual reality of it. And so sometimes in culinary school, we're also setting them up with an unrealistic expectation. How do you see that playing out a little bit? Because they are so excited to go out there and be a chef. The reality is you are going to have to put in the work. You are going to have to put in that effort. You are going to have to struggle, different, not physical and verbal abuse, but you're going to have to find a path that's not just laid out for you. You're going to have to blaze it on your own. So how are you kind of communicating that with students or young line cooks as you see them coming up?
That's such a multifaceted question.
That's a huge question. Unpack it however you like.
I think, first of all, you just have to be, I try to remind myself and them that, like, we're just real people. And I think when they can, so the biggest thing that I try to do, right, is always admit when you make a mistake, and always, always, always never go home without going to each person saying, thank you so much. Have a great night. Whether the night was good or not, they stayed and they worked. And so you thank them, for coming back. And I thank you for coming back again tomorrow, because we all know there's been times we've walked out the doors of a restaurant and been like, I am never going back there again.
Yeah. And
somehow through whatever plays itself out between midnight and 2:30 a.m., we get mad, and then it's like degrees of anger, right? You're mad, and then you're happy, and then you're excited, and then you're going to go back tomorrow and do it all again. So I think just keeping a level ground where it's like, it's okay to make mistakes in here. It's not TV where you're going to get screamed at and, over berated, but you're also not going to be an executive in 2 months when you just graduated.
Yeah. So
keeping it a very real environment where, again, back to the communication, where you're constantly, this is what you need to do to reach your next step. This is what it is, right? Because we've been very glamorized, right, with the TV, where it's like, oh, I'm going to go from, pennies to riches in 6 months. The truth of the matter is, I'd love to be on Top Chef, but many, many, many chefs are never going to see a TV, and they're never going to be millionaires.
Yeah. So
keeping that excitement alive while also not encouraging people to have a misconstrued reality of what's going to happen to them on either side, right? Good or bad. So I'm not going to scream at you and kick you out of a kitchen and call you worthless, but I'm also not going to promote you to a sous chef in 1 month. So just keeping it very real. And to do that, I need to remain real as well and not walk around like I'm, some sort of like mecca, because honestly, it's just dinner. We're not saving lives. We're not going to space. It is an establishment, and people have become very infatuated and kind of super into kitchens and what happens. And I love that, because that means that more people are cooking at home. Yeah. So I think that, television and all that stuff has been really good for the industry, but in some points, it's created a false reality of what actually happens as well. So I guess to answer your question, just to kind of make sure that I stay level and I stay grounded and kind of lead a team with that level kind of, we're not going to be horrible. We're not going to be great. We strive to be amazing, but like, we're all not just going to be rich in 2 months.
Yeah, it sounds very Buddhist, like the middle path.
Yeah,
is the path to enlightenment. So I'm interested then too for how you're kind of bringing about your menu with, you have a very clear and different philosophy for your approach. And I think that's playing out within the kitchen and the culture that you're creating. Love. Absolutely appreciate that. We need more of it, which is why I'm so happy to have you on. How then are you thinking differently about the application on the menu itself, the food that kids these days get to cook alongside you, because you are at a steakhouse kind of concept. You're at the Four Seasons. There is a historical expectation there already baked in, and now you're shifting that as well. Talk about that a little bit. I'm fascinated with your philosophy when it comes to the application of the menu.
Sure. So when I arrived at the Four Seasons, I had visited the property, many years ago under the Comp Night umbrella. Four Seasons benefits for us. And it was very dark and dingy. And, it kind of looked like a little bit of a cigar club.
Right away when you said that is the first thing I thought. Once again, a boys club, smoking cigars, drinking whiskey.
Just like a man's, almost like a man cave. And when the Four Seasons paired with our designers, they really, really, really did such a great job of lightening the whole room and just bringing in this like femininity to the room, just a softer touch with a softer approach and, softer place settings. And the whole thing is just very bright and beautiful. And so I took a walk around the restaurant and just thought, what kind of food is going to look good at these tables, and translate also so that we don't lose ourselves in all these different themes. Right? Because the number one thing I hate when I'm dining is when you go to a restaurant, you're like, what is this? Like, what kind of restaurant is this? So I got together with the sous chef team and kind of with the general manager, Javi, and our hotel manager, and just kind of, said, what is it that we see in this room? And what we see, I think, is this kind of crescendo into the steak. So it's a given that we're going to purchase great meat. I mean, we spend a lot of money to make sure that the center of your plate is the best thing that we can get. And then we don't really do much to it. We salt it, we pepper it, we paint it with a little bit of Cabernet butter while it's on the grill just for some added flair. We put a little of our like A1 that we call Edge 1 on the plate, and that's it, right? That speaks for itself. I would be doing the meat an injustice if I did anything more than that, in my opinion. But what we want to do is make sure that from the second you come in and you order oysters, or, we've rolled out this specialty line of tinned fish, or, our salads that are a little bit creative, or we've done a lot of work to do crudos and octopus and foie and stuff like that, that you kind of get this, like I said, crescendo up to the steak. So everything that we do uplifts that center plate meat and doesn't deter from it, but you go away from it thinking, this wasn't just an 8-ounce fillet with a side of mash. This was, a crudo that built into an octo that built into a great steak with, orange and Duga glazed carrots that like I remember over, what a typical steakhouse experience would be. So a lot of our focus and a lot of our energy goes into not just sourcing of the best ingredients, but kind of doing everything we can to uplift them, but not to overtake them.
Yeah, I like this concept because we try too hard far too often in our career. I've been guilty of it. Like trying just because I can doesn't mean I should, right? And so the fact that you can be playful, take them on a little bit of a journey, like be whimsical, all these different things that we do love to do as the creative side of being chefs. And then when it's time to just get your meat in two, it's really, really good meat, and the sides like really uplift it. I like that. It's comfortable when it needs to be comfortable, and it challenges us when we want to be challenged. We're not trying to be full throttle all the time. And sometimes at the end of a meal, even though you're like individual components were good, it's like I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Like I'm exhausted. I don't know when I'm going to be ready for this again. It's can be a challenge. So I appreciate that kind of that crescendo. I like that. I like how you're thinking about it being kind of a symphony for you. So I appreciate that.
I think it segues a little bit too into, it's been a long time that we've kind of kept allergies at bay, right? Like we treat them like they're in like the unguarded part of the pool.
Yeah.
And I think we have to, as chefs, embrace that. We have to include gluten-free and vegan and vegetarian and, nightshades and all this stuff. And that the challenge for us is that people that have allergies, like I myself have developed a sesame allergy in the last 5 years. People that have allergies, I guess intolerance is what it would be, but I think they're just not allowing us anymore to be like, oh, you don't eat meat, we're just going to pile 3 vegetables on your plate in sections and send it off. They're demanding that they have an equal experience to the people who are getting a $400 porterhouse. So I think what we do is we really try to put a lot of emphasis into our vegan and vegetarian and all these options to make sure that if you're a vegetarian, you get the same exact experience that somebody who's ordering, $400 worth of A5 would get. And so that's a challenge for us as well, to fall, not only accept the allergies and the restrictions, but to embrace them and to use that as fuel to ignite us to create more and better.
Yeah, accepting that challenge, I think is key. And look, let's be practical about it. If you look at any trend, those emerging markets and those styles of food and dietary needs and focus points are becoming big money. So if you are not aware of that, you are losing out on tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars as that continues to escalate, as people are understanding their own dietary needs, what feels good and right for them, and using their voice to say, I deserve to have a great experience as well. And those that are fulfilling that need they're going to create regulars a lot faster and a more loyal fan base a lot faster than somebody who's just doing what's been done before because it's played out. And so I can appreciate that for sure, and the challenge of doing that within kind of that more traditional steakhouse model and the Four Seasons and all that, I can respect that is a massive challenge that you all are undertaking, but clearly it plays into the ethos and the vision that you all have as a whole. So it makes sense. You're not round peg in a square hole. It's an extension of who you already are. So I want to finish with that, last thoughts as who you all are at Edge and what you're doing in the kitchen. Any last thoughts? Maybe even speak to some of those kids these days in your kitchen. I'd love for them to feel like they got acknowledged in what's happening here with you and I talking today.
I mean, I think what we try to do is we're just people trying to give people good food, and we're trying to work hard and we're trying to support our families and provide, and we're trying to have a good time while we work, and we're trying to keep innovating, and everything that can be done has been done, but it's all about trying to find your truest self and who you are in all realms of life. But when you're a culinarian, to find your voice as a culinarian and not let all this other noise, of the celebrities and what they're doing and what they're creating cloud your vision. You are who you are. Stay true to yourself. Never lose yourself. And I guess if I had anything to say to like the young people, it would be, just don't accept mediocrity and don't let people treat you poorly, because there are chefs out there who will help you and focus you and groom you and help you be successful without disrespecting you. So
that's it. And more every single day. And those that don't understand that is the way it should have been,
right,
always, and it will be now and forever in the future, are just going extinct. So appreciate Jessica, appreciate the work that you're doing, appreciate the inspiration that you just gave all of us. We want to continue to create inclusive workplaces. That's what Workplaces Worth Working, what Best Served is all about. So once again, everyone, Jessica Biederman, chef at Edge Restaurant, Denver, Colorado. Jessica, have a great one. Go take care of that dog.
I will. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. Have a great.
We flow with it. This is the show goes on, and you know what? The dog needs some love too. So we love all of it. Appreciate you, Jessica.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers. All right, everybody, that is it. A great episode. Really appreciate the approach Jessica has. We need more leaders that are thinking beyond our own past failures and successes and looking at ushering in the future of this industry. It will be the 22-year-old that so many chefs and so many individuals in restaurants are pointing fingers at and saying they don't want to work. Kids these days, all of that, the reality is they have a higher expectation, a grander vision than even we do. It's time to start listening. That's it for this episode. Once again, this was Best Served Podcast 322, Beyond the Boys Club Kitchen with Jessica Biederman of Edge Restaurant, Denver, Colorado. Workplaces Worth Working, episode number 15. Appreciate you all as always. Cheers.